Here we go. Okay, Bez Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Baba Metzia Daf Yud Beis. We're going to discuss, just to review the Mishnah, and then discuss what the Gemara has to say. Very straightforward daf today. Ra an oisan, if an owner of a field sees people rotzin acha Metzia, running after something that, let's say something from a plane landed in your property, okay, your field, and people are running to get it. Or achat tzivi shavor, or let's say a deer came into your property and it has a broken leg. Achar goizoloi shloi parchu, or let's say pigeons that cannot fly. So you see it in your field and you're standing right by your field. We learned that yesterday. Ba'ama, and you said zachsali sadi, my field should acquire it. Zachsalai, it belongs to the owner of the field. But if you have a deer that could run away, and it's running through your field, and it's going to run out of your field. Or there's pigeons that just landed, but they can easily fly away from your field. And so therefore, you want to acquire those pigeons because it's in your field. My field should acquire it. It doesn't mean anything. That's what we learned in the Mishnah. So now we go to Daf Yud Beis and Beis. Gufa, we learned in the Brisa. Ra Aisan, we said a teaching before. Ra Aisan Ratzin Acha Metzia. You see people running after an item that was found in your property. Again, let's say an item fell from a plane, it landed in your property. So, and you say you want to acquire it. Alma Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yirmiyah said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Hu Sharatz Achar Achrein Umagyan. It means a very important point that the only time you could acquire it is if technically you could run after that item and grab it. Let's say it's an animal and it could run away before you catch up to it. You're not coining it, even though it's in your field. You have to be able to grab it. Okay? That's so let's say the deer. If the deer is in your field and you want to acquire it and say it's mine, you have to be able to run after it and catch up to it. And because really you're trying to be kind of acquire something from Hefker. Nobody's selling it to you. You're just acquiring it because it's in your field. By Rabbi Yirmiyah, so Rabbi Yirmiyah asked the question. Let's say somebody gifts you an animal, and it somehow is in your property, but you cannot run after it and reach it. It's just like running into your property. Someone leaves a deer into your property and it belonged to somebody, and that deer is running out of your property. Are you kind of it? Now here, what should be the difference? The difference is because he is gifting it to you. So you have somebody else pushing the kinyan on you, so to speak. So would you acquire it even though you can't catch up to the animal? It would still work even though you could run after it and not catch up to it, because somebody is gifting it to you. He's helping you acquire it, so you don't need that technical thing that you have to be able to catch the animal. Boya Rabbi Rava. So that leads us to this question. Boya Rava. Rava asked the question. Now, Zorak Arnaki bepesach zeh and v'yotze bepesach achamaho. A guy threw a wallet into somebody's house. It went through one door opening and went out the other door opening. Is the one who owns the house acquire that wallet? So the question is, since it was never planning to land, it was just flying through your house. So therefore, also we consider it as if it rested, and therefore you acquire it, or because it's in the air and it didn't rest, that we don't consider it like it's rested. Now, if something eventually was going to land in your property, right? If you knew for a fact it was going to fall into your property, you acquire it even before it's in your property. We learned that in Masechta Gittin, where a person is standing at the top of a roof. If the woman is standing on top of a roof and a man throws a get to his wife, as soon as it goes into the airspace of the roof, it becomes mugureshes because it was going to eventually land on that roof. So we see that something is landing. As soon as it's in the airspace, it's as if it's landed already. But here, it's ein soifer lanuach. You see, the key word is it was flying through your house, going in through one window, going out the other window. So perhaps we don't consider it at rest, and you would not acquire the arnaki. Amalei Papa Larava, so Papa said to Rava, Amri Larav Adabamatana Larava, and others say it was Rava. Amri Lavina Rava. Right? So somebody said Rava, we're not sure. Is it Rapapa, Rav Adabamatana, or Ravina said to Rava, Lav Hainu, that our Mishnah. Roa Oisen Rotzen Acha Metzia. If you see people running after a Metzia, and the Omer Rabbi Yirmiyah, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yirmiyah said the name Rabbi Yochanan, Hu Sharat Acharehen Umagian. It has to be something that you could run after it and catch up to it, right? That's only a Metzia. Uboy Rabbi Yirmiyah has the question, B'matana hey. What would be done with the matana? Do you need to be able to catch up to it? The kibla minei rababa baba kahana, matana av bishrat zachrein vein magin. Even though you can't catch up to it, it's considered. It's considered as we since somebody else is pushing the kinyan onto you, so it works, even though you can't catch up to the animal. So what the Gemara is basically trying to say, since the guy that threw the arniki, the guy that threw the wallet, wants you to acquire it, so even though it was something that that wasn't going to land into your house, but since it crossed the airspace of your house, you should be able to acquire it for the very fact that somebody's helping this kinyan happen. So what the Gemara is comparing, to be precise, is a wallet flying through your house, which didn't land in your house, to an animal running through your property, which animal running through your property. If someone gifted you an animal and now just ran through your property, you acquire it, even though you can't catch up to the animal. So if you've a wallet flying through your house and somebody gifted you that wallet, even though it didn't land in your house, you should be able to acquire it. So that's what the Gemara is comparing: a flying item to a running animal. Amalei. So Rav answered to Ravina, not true. Misgalgel ka'amrit. You're comparing an animal that's rolling around in the house. Shani misgalgel k'dechmurachtami. When something is rolling in your house, it's as if it's rested. It's as if it's because it's at the end of the day, it's still touching the ground. It's touching the ground of the field. But an arniki that's flying through your house never touch the ground of your house, so therefore you don't acquire it. New Mishnah. Metzias benoi ubenitoy haktanim. Let's say you have your son or daughter who's under bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah. They find something. Who does it belong to? And we're going to define kitanim as somebody who's under bas mitzvah. Metzias avdoi v'shivchosoi haknanim. Or your evet knani, or your knani maid. So your knani maid, who does it belong to? If they find something. Oh, Metzia, so the Mishnah said Metzias ishtoi, or if your wife finds something, right? So if wife finds something, harei elishloi, it belongs to the husband. Okay, it belongs to the husband. Metzias benoi ubitay hagdolim. But let's say your son or daughter who's over bar or mas mitzvah, they find something. Or Metzias avdoi v'shivchasai ha'ivrim, or you have a maid or a slave who are Jewish. So you don't really own them. You own their service, but you don't own their body per se. Mitzias ishtoi shegirsha afal pisha noinasan ksuba, a woman that you divorced and you did not yet give a ksuba, so she's divorced. She's not connected to the husband. So if she finds something, or right, in those cases, harei helu shalahem, they themselves could keep it. The Jewish slave can keep it. The Jewish maid can keep it. The wife that's divorced can keep it because it doesn't belong to her husband. So now the Gemara is going to address the understanding of the first part of the Mishnah. Amar Shmuel explained. Why did Chazal say Metzias katan la'aviv? If a kid under bar mitzvah finds something, he has to give it to his father. So how do you know? Maybe he can keep it. Why can't a katan keep something? Answers the Gemara. Shmuel says, it must be that a katan can't acquire anything, right? He cannot acquire anything. But the reason why it belongs to the father is because when he finds something, he runs to his dad to tell him he found something. And he doesn't keep it in his hand. He right away gives it to his father. So therefore, it's almost as if he picked it up and said, I'm going to be zoichet for my father. So if he finds it, nobody else can grab it for him. It's almost like he can't keep it himself, but as soon as he picks it up, it already belongs to the father. You just can't pull it out of the hands of the katan and keep it. So lememra, the way Shmuel explained, the Sava Shmuel holds, Kotan lesle schil and afshe midaraisa. A Kotan cannot acquire items midaraisa. Midaraisa, he can't acquire items. He could acquire on behalf of his father, and maybe that's the Rabbanon, but certainly for himself, he cannot acquire something midaraisa. Is that true? But Tanya, we learned to the Brisa, and we know one of the matnas aniyim is leket, things that fall while you're cutting the field, right? When you're cutting something and the two stalks fall, you have to leave it there. It belongs to the poor people. So a guy has a field and he hires a worker to cut his field. Yelakit b'noi achrav, then his son, who is considered poor, could be able to collect the leket, the matnas aniyim. Why? Because he's a stranger to the owner of the field, right? The son of the worker is a stranger to the owner of the field. So he could grab the leket. But let's say the worker has an interest as a sharecropping interest in the profits of the field. Let's say he gets half or a third or a quarter of the profits of the field. So his father, the worker that's cutting the field and harvesting the field, is actually an owner of the field, semi. So therefore, his son cannot be the one collecting the leket. Because once you own a field, right, you cannot collect your own matnas aniyim. You have to give it away. So if the worker is hired only to cut a field, so then his son could collect the matnas aniyim. But if he's an owner of the field, because he has a profit interest in the field, then the Tanakama holds his son cannot collect after him. Rabbi Yossi says, no matter what, the father, the son, or his daughter of the worker can collect the leket, even if the worker has a profit sharing in the field. The owner of son can collect afterwards. Now, Shmuel. Now, the poil himself, the worker himself, if he's a profit sharing in that field, he's definitely an owner. And Shmuel said, halacha Rabbi Yossi. The halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. So now let's examine this. If you say bishlama katan isleis chil and afshe, a katan has a way to collect on his own. He could acquire something on his own, and it doesn't really belong to the father. Ki komalaket, when he's collecting this matnas aniyim, l'nafshei komalaket, he's only collecting on behalf of himself because it really belongs to the katan, to the minor. Va'avui minei kazachi, and the father is getting it as a gift, but really it really belongs to the katan. So that makes perfect sense because really the katan is separate from his father, and therefore he's like a strange ani, a strange poor person who's collecting leket from a field that doesn't belong to him. And so if he collects it, and then he gives it to his father, who's an owner of the field, who's a worker owner of the field, that's okay. But if you say katan leslie schil and afshe, a katan cannot acquire anything for himself, right? As soon as he picks it up, it automatically belongs to the father. So kikan kabalaki, when this worker's son collects the matnas aniyim, la'aviv kamalakin, he's really collecting it on behalf of his father. So, but aviu asherhu, but the father is a rich guy. It means not just a rich guy, but he's also the owner of the field. And therefore, it's almost as if the katan's like a shliach of the father, collecting leket on his behalf. And you're not allowed to collect the leket from your own field. So the question is, amai ishte b'noim laket acharov? Then why could they collect afterwards? So this brisa, who Shmuel said we paskin like Rabbi Yossi, has to hold that katan has a schil and afshe. And you just told me Shmuel holds katan cannot acquire things on his own behalf. Answers the Gemara, Shmuel, the Tahama, the Tani Didon Kamo. Shmuel actually is explaining our Mishnah, that our Mishnah holds a katan cannot acquire anything. That's why the Metzia of a katan, he doesn't keep it, he has to give it to his father. Belay, loy svirle. But Shmuel himself will hold that a katan could acquire something for himself, and without the father having any rights to it. So Shmuel himself will paskin like Rabbi Yossi, who disagrees with our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, is that true? Rabbi Yossi katan isleis chia midaraisa. Do you say certainly that katan has a right to acquire something midaraisa? Is that Rabbi Yossi agrees to that? But now we learned in the Mishnah, Metzias cheresh shayte v'katan, if someone who's not normal or not sane or find something, or a cotton find something. So yesh behem mishum gezel mipnei darchisham. You're not allowed to steal it from them. They don't really acquire it, but you're not allowed to steal it from them because we want to keep the peace. So a fight shouldn't happen. You let the cotton keep it. He found it, he keeps it. Rabbi Yossi says, not only is it darchei shalom, but gezel gomer. It's if you take it from the cotton, it's as if you're stealing. As if you're stealing. It's not really stealing. The Amar of Chizar Chuz is saying, gezel gomer divreya. See, it's only a gezel midrabanim. Midoraisa, it really doesn't belong to the cotton. Because the way Rav Chizda explains Rabbi Yossi does not hold a cotton can acquire anything. Rabbi Yossi is just saying that midrabanan, they made it that if you take it from the cotton, it's as if you're stealing from him. And nafkamina, what will be the nafkamina between the Tanakama, who holds its Metzia belongs to the cotton, mitnei darchei shalom, and Rabbi Yossi, who calls it gezel midrabanan, loitzia b'dayanim. The nafkamina is, can you sue to get it back? According to, since Rabbi Yossi said it's gezel midrabanan, you could actually take the father of the cotton could take the person who stole from his son to court and get the item back. But if you hold it's darchei shalom, it was just a piece, a civil law, but not something you can actually pull back. So then darchei shalom, then you once you take it from the cotton, the father cannot get it back. But we see from here that Yossi holds that cotton does not have schiyah midaraisa. Ella Amar Abaya. Abaya said like this: really, a cotton has no right to acquire something. So really, when the cotton picks it up, he's picking up for his father. So then, who's the worker? Why is he allowed to do that? The answer is his father is the owner of the field. Answer the Gemara. Asu kamisha holchabon nimushes daniyim gufayim maschin datayo. When other aniyim see the worker's son picking up their leket, they give up hope. In other words, they say let him have it. They don't mind, because sometimes even when there's leket on the field, aniyim have a right to say, we don't want it anyway. The Gemara says, there's a Mishnah in Masechta Peah, when is everybody allowed to take leket? When you see it on the field, when you know that poor people came and looked at the leket and didn't take it. So then it's free for all for anybody to take. So once the worker comes with his children, when the other aniyim see that the guy has his children took him to work with him, so then they're masiach daitayu. They let him keep it. Savri, they think brach tehech malaka, let this son keep it, and we don't mind. That's the way it is. They give up hope. Amalei Rab Abba Matan Abaya. So it must be that you're causing the other poor people to give up hope, not to collect the leikat, and therefore it becomes like hefker. Are you allowed to put crouch a lion in your field so poor people should see it and run away? In other words, you want anybody not to collect leket, so all you do, or bat nasanim, you just put a lion there, so nobody's going to come. The aniyim are going to say, okay, let anybody keep it. Is that permitted? Because that's basically what's happening when you have the kid coming to work with you. The aniyim are going to say, give it to the kid. That's not right. Rava explained like this. We go to Amid Beis. We make somebody who did not collect it as if he did collect it. It means we make the cotton, even though he cannot acquire it, as if he acquired it. It's a special dispensation for the worker's son. My timer. All poor people don't mind that. Why? Because they don't mind when a worker brings his son to the field to collect leket, because that's the right thing to do, because when they're going to be hired to do work, they would also want their children to be able to collect the leket. So they don't mind seeing it when another person has been hired to have his son collect the leket. So it's like a given unspoken agreement between aniyim to allow the son of the poyel to work. But really, so what the Gemara concludes is that cotton does not have schiyah lenafshe. He cannot acquire something for himself. So that explained the Mishnah, which says Metzias benoi hakatanim belong to the father, but gedolim, they can keep it themselves. So now the Gemara says, I have another explanation of what a gadol and what a cotton is. It could be, so the Gemara says, Rab Chia bar Abba, all these explanations disagree with Rab Chia bar Abba. Amar Rab Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, loy gadol mamish. A gadol doesn't mean someone who's over bar mitzvah. The loy katan mamish. It doesn't mean somebody who's under bar mitzvah. Really, you could be Ella Godol v'Somach al Shulchan Aviv if you have an old person, an over bar mitzvah boy, who is eating on his father's table, doesn't have a job. He could even be 30 and doesn't have a job. So then he is Zehu Katan. That's considered a Katan, and therefore the Metzia belongs to the father. Katan ve'einu Somach al Shulchan Aviv. But if you have a young kid who's not relying on his father, in other words, if he took a job already, Zehu Gadol, that's considered Gadol, and he doesn't have to give the Metzia to his father. Why? Because probably he's Zoiche for himself, and to keep the peace, he doesn't have to give it to his father because his father is not supporting him. So why shouldn't he be able to keep the Metzia for himself? Another piece of Gemara, and then we'll stop. The Gemara continues. Metzias avdei v'shikvasei ivrim harehun shel atman. If you have a Jewish slave or Jewish maid, they could keep it themselves. So the Gemara says, why should a Jewish slave be able to keep it himself? He works for his master. He owes it to his master. Amai lo yehei ela poel. He should be like a worker, a guy who hired a worker to work for him an entire day. So anything he finds, he has to give it to his boss. Utanya, we learned in the Maraisa, Mitzias poel atzmai. A worker could keep the Metzia that he finds to himself, but not in all cases. When did we say this? If you hired him for a specific job, you're doing specific job like hoeing and plowing or whatever you are cutting. So then you hired him for a specific job. So if he finds during his break time a Metzia, he could keep it. But if you hire somebody, I say I'm hiring you for the entire day. And when you own a Jewish slave, that's basically what you're saying. I'm buying you that you're going to work every single day for me, whatever job I have. So Mitziyas in the Balabayas. So the Brisa says the Mitzia belongs to the Balabayas. So why did our Mishnah say that if you have a Jewish slave, the Jewish slave could keep the Mitzia? Amar Rab Chia bar Abba, Rab Yochanan, Rab Chia bar Acha said in the name of Yochanan, here we're talking about Be'eved Noikiv Margolius Askinim. We have you bought a slave, but he only has one job of stringing pearls. She'ein rabbi roitzel l'shanois l'marach. He doesn't want to ruin his hands or whatever. He has a specific skill, so he bought him as a slave, but only to do a specific job. So if while he's not doing the job, he finds something, the slave is allowed to keep it. That's what our Mishnah is discussing. Amar Rabba gives another text. He didn't waste a second. While he was working, he caught a Metzia. Let's say it fell from the sky and he caught it with his left hand, but he's still working with his right hand. Then he could keep it because he didn't interrupt the working that he was doing for his master. Rapapa said that we said that Poyel all the Metzias belong to the Balabayas. That's not by a worker, every worker. It's Kegoin Sheshachrei Lelaka Metzias. That's a special worker that not that you hired him for the day, but you actually hired him to find something. Why would you hire somebody to find something? When the river flowed over its banks and a lot of fish flowed over, and when the water receded, you hired your worker to collect fish, to find some valuable items. So that was a specific hiring to find a Metzia. That's why it belongs to the Balabayas. But normally Metzia doesn't of a poil. Even if you hired him to do any amount of work for the entire day, he could keep it himself. And the same idea would be by a Jewish slave. Says the Gemara. The Gemara says, we said a Jewish maid belongs. She could keep it. Now, why could she keep the Metzia? If she's a maid that actually is a bas mitzvah, so my boy gabe, why is she a maid? A Jewish girl cannot be a maid if she's over bas mitzvah and brought 2 hairs. If she didn't bring 2 saras, why does the Mishnah say she keeps it? If her father's around, the avu then she should give it to her father. But let's say the father died, so then she's not even a maid anymore. She leaves, even though she's a maid. If her father died while she was sold as a maid, she automatically goes free. Because the Amr Shlakish says, Amma Avriya kana asma misas Amr Shusa Mikal V'chayma. And Amma Avriya, will go free if her father died while she's in service from the master. Because when her father's not around, when she's just living by her father, and her father dies, she's kind of herself. So Rava made a kal v'chomer that even when she is working for the master from Rishus Adain, she's and with Rishus Adain, she could even go out with 2 years. She should be able to go out if her father died. That's what Rosh Lakish said. So if her father died, why is she still a slave? So V'lavi Taisiv Rish Lakish. So the Gemara asked, but didn't you slug up Rish Lakish? That's what Rish Lakish's idea, that when the father dies, she goes free as a slave. We refuted that. So Mahai Namit Hevi Tiyufta, will it be a refutation for our Mishnah too? Because our Mishnah implies that the girl is still a slave despite her father being dead. And says the Gemara, you don't have to say that. It's the Pshat in our Mishnah. Lo'ilam the Islav. Our Mishnah is talking about the father is still around. My Harein Shlen la Puki de Rabba. It doesn't mean she keeps it. It doesn't belong to the master. It means she gives it to her father. That's what it means. So that her father is still around. She didn't bring 2 hairs. So therefore, it doesn't belong to the master, but it still belongs to her father. One more piece, Metzia's Ishta. If a woman got divorced, she could keep the Metzia for herself. Girsha, Pshita, if she got divorced, certainly she could keep it for herself. She's not married. Answers the Gemara, here we're talking about Megreshes, Vein Megreshes. She's Suffolk divorced. A woman that got a Suffolk divorce. How does a woman get a Suffolk divorce? When the husband threw a get, we're not sure if it landed in her Dalet Amos or not landed in Dalet Amos. So she is a Suffolk divorce. We're not sure. So despite that, the husband still has to give her food. So now, but nevertheless, even though the husband's still supporting her food because she's not completely divorced, we don't know, but if she finds something, she keeps it. Because the whole reason why the finding of a woman belongs to her husband, because he shouldn't get angry at her because he's giving her food and she gets to keep the findings that she finds in the street. But Hachab, in this case, he tried to divorce her. And now she's in limbo because she's half a divorced. So despite that, we want him to give her, let's say, a new divorce. So therefore we say if she finds some, she can keep it. Isle Eva ve'eva. We want there to be animosity between the 2 of them, so that he will be inclined to give her a complete divorce, 100% divorce, and be done with this type of wife. Okay, so that was the end of this daf. Daf Yud Beis from Bava Metzia.
Sure, thank you.